The first thing Elias Reed saw was not a person. It was a strip of blue cloth, snapping hard in the winter wind. Someone had tied it to the top wire of his north fence, where no traveler should have been, 10 miles from the nearest road, and even farther from any warm roof. At first, Elias thought it was trash blown out of a wagon. Then he saw the tracks beneath it, 2 sets of footprints, small, uneven, almost swallowed by the snow, and both trails ended at the frozen wash below his fence line. The winter of 1879 had come down hard on the eastern edge of New Mexico territory. It did not fall like the soft winters people told stories about back east. It scraped across the flats. It sealed water troughs under glassy ice. It turned the grass brittle and silver. It made every mile of open country feel twice as far. Elias Reed knew that kind of cold. He was a widower, a cattleman, and a man who had learned to live with more silence than most people could stand. His ranch sat in a long, empty stretch between low hills and thorny mesquite, where the wind could travel for hours without touching a wall. That morning, one of his cows had broken through a drift near the north pasture. Spent half the day pulling the animal free, then mending the fence where the wire had sagged under ice. By the time he turned toward home, the sky was already lowering into a bruised purple dusk. That was when he saw the blue cloth. His horse, Juniper, stopped before Elias asked her to. The mare lifted her head and blew steam through her nostrils. Elias reached for the rifle in his saddle boot, then stopped with his hand halfway there. Down in the wash, beneath a leaning mesquite, 2 figures sat pressed against the bank. For a moment the storm made them look like stones. Then one of them moved. Elias dismounted slowly, but only because she had wedged her back against the frozen dirt. Her blanket was wrapped around the younger woman beside her. The younger one's head rested against her shoulder, her eyes half closed, her lips pale from cold. They were Apache. Elias understood that in one glance, and he also understood what that glance would mean to many men in the nearest town. Men who would stop seeing hunger the moment they saw who was hungry. Men who would turn fear into judgment before asking a single question. The older woman looked at him with the same kind of fear, not pleading, measuring. Spend the last of her strength standing between Elias and the younger woman if she had to. Elias looked at the rifle still hanging from his saddle. Then he took it out, turned, and laid it on the ground behind him. The older woman's eyes followed every movement. Elias raised both hands. "I am not here to hurt you," he said, though he knew the words were nearly useless. The wind took half of them away. He stepped back to Juniper, opened his saddlebag, and pulled out a tin cup and a canteen. He poured water slowly, so they could see there was no trick. Then he set the cup on a flat stone and backed away. The older woman waited. After Elias had moved 3 full steps from it, did she reach for the cup. Her hand shook so violently that water spilled over her fingers. The younger woman tried to drink, but her teeth chattered too hard. Elias felt something tighten in his chest. He had seen calves freeze standing up. He had seen men underestimate winter and become part of the country before sunrise. He knew the look of a living body making its last bargain with the cold. No one survived a night like that in a wash, not with clouds closing in again, not with clothes already stiff from frost. He pointed toward the dim yellow square of his ranch house far across the field. "Fire," he said. "Elias!" The older woman did not answer, but her eyes moved from the house, to the younger woman, to the darkening sky. Whatever choice she had left, the cold was taking it from her. Elias brought Juniper closer and spread a spare coat over the saddle. The older woman refused to ride first. She pushed the younger woman up with both hands, though her own knees nearly buckled. Elias lifted the younger woman only as much as he had to. Careful, slow, keeping his face turned away from anything that might feel like insult. The older woman walked beside the horse the whole way. She did not let go of the younger woman's ankle once. The first hard flakes of the second storm were striking the porch. Elias did not take them through the front door at first. He understood pride. He understood fear. Instead, he opened the side room he used for lambing in bad weather, swept it clean with his boot, and set a fire in the iron stove. Heat came slowly. The room smelled of straw, smoke, wool, and damp leather. He brought blankets from his own bed, a kettle of broth, a pan of beans, cornbread wrapped in a cloth. He left the food within reach, and then stepped outside, closing the door halfway, but not all the way. Not a locked door. Not a trap. A choice. For a long time he heard nothing but wind. Then a spoon scraped against the bowl. Later that night, when the storm hammered the walls and the stove glowed red through its seams, Elias sat in the kitchen with his boots still on. He could have slept, but he didn't. Twice he rose and carried more wood to the side room. Twice the older woman was awake when he opened the door, watching. The younger woman slept in broken pieces, turning her face toward the heat as if she were following the sun in a dream. By morning, the ranch had vanished behind snow. The world outside the windows was white enough to erase direction. Elias made coffee, biscuits, and a little more broth. When he carried the tray to the side room, the older woman had folded the blanket she did not use. The younger woman was sitting up, wrapped to the chin, still weak, but breathing easier. Elias pointed to himself again. Elias. The older woman pressed one hand to her chest and gave a name he could not pronounce. He tried once, failed badly. For the first time, the younger woman almost smiled. That almost smile changed the room more than the fire did. Over the next 2 days, they learned a language made of hands, objects, and patience. Elias drew hills and ash on the hearth. The older woman corrected his lines with a stick. She pointed southwest. Then she drew a long mark for a storm. Then 2 small marks separated from a larger group. He understood enough. They had been traveling with others when the whiteout hit. The wind had buried tracks. Snow had covered the landmarks. A dry creek bed had looked like a safe path until it turned them in the wrong direction. Food ran out. The younger woman weakened. The older woman tore strips from the blue shawl around her shoulders and tied them where she could, hoping someone from her people might follow. The last strip had gone on Elias Reed's fence. The cloth had not been trash. It had been a final signal. On the 3rd morning, a rider came up from the south. Jeb Whitlock, Elias's nearest neighbor, was a wide man with a red face and a voice that carried even when he tried to speak low. He had come to ask whether Elias had seen smoke, tracks, or strangers moving through the draw. Then he saw 2 sets of footprints near the side room. His eyes changed. "Tell me those ain't what I think they are," Jeb said. Elias stepped onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind him. "They're 2 women who were dying in my wash." Jeb looked past him. "Apache? They were cold. That's not what I asked. It's the answer you're getting." Jeb leaned in, lowering his voice as if mercy were something shameful. "You keep them here, and word gets out. Men from town will come asking why. Patrol might come too. You don't know who they're tied to." Elias looked at the white field beyond the barn. Somewhere under that snow was the trail they had nearly died on. "I know they were tied to each other," he said. "That was enough." Jeb shook his head. "You're making trouble out of kindness." "No," Elias said. "I'm refusing to make cruelty out of caution." For a moment, neither man moved. He sat into the snow, turned his horse, and rode off without taking coffee. Elias watched him disappear until the wind swallowed the sound of hooves. When he opened the side room door again, the older woman was standing just inside it. She had heard the voices, not the meaning, but she understood the shape of danger when it stood on a porch. Elias pointed to the road where Jeb had gone. Then he shook his head. No. He pointed to the stove. Stay. The older woman studied him for a long time. Then she lowered the small piece of firewood she had been holding like a club. That was the first day the fear began to loosen. Not vanish, loosen. The ranch changed after that. The older woman repaired a tear in Elias's saddle blanket, with stitches so even they looked made by a machine. She patched one of his work shirts without being asked. The younger woman, once she could stand, carried kindling in small, careful loads, and laughed silently when Elias burned a pan of biscuits because he was watching the weather instead of the stove. At supper, they sat in the same room but not too close. At first, Elias ate at the table while they ate near the fire. Then one evening, the younger woman placed the empty bread plate halfway between them. The next night, Elias put it there first. No speech made it official. The plate did. Still, the danger had not left. The younger woman's fever returned on the 5th night, harder than before. Her skin burned while the room around her froze. The older woman pressed damp cloths to her forehead, whispering words Elias could not understand but recognized as prayer. Outside, the storm rose again. A bad one. The kind that erased fence posts and buried wagon ruts. The kind that made a man feel foolish for building anything and calling it shelter. Elias had only a little medicine in the house. Not enough. The nearest trading post was half a day's ride in decent weather, impossible in that storm. So he did what he could. More broth, more water, more wood. Drove alive until the iron sides pulsed dull red. Near midnight, the older woman took the last blue strip from her shawl. She held it in both hands. Elias understood before she pointed. If her people were searching, they would not find the fence now. Snow had buried the tracks. The wind had torn the earlier strips loose. But the ranch windmill still stood above the drifts, dark against the storm whenever lightning flashed behind the clouds. Elias took the cloth. He tied it to the highest rung he could reach. Then, because blue cloth in a blizzard was not enough, he filled a lantern, climbed the windmill frame, and hung it beneath the strip. The flame bent and shivered inside the glass. A small light, a foolish light, the only one they had. Before dawn, the fever broke. The younger woman slept. The older woman sat on the floor beside her, too tired to hold herself straight. And for the first time since Elias had found them, she let her eyes close while he was still in the room. That trust felt heavier than any thanks. 2 days later, the sky cleared. The snow did not melt, but the sun returned with a hard, pale shine. Elias was chopping ice from the water trough when Juniper lifted her head toward the eastern ridge. Riders. 5 of them, moving slowly. Not like men hunting cattle. People searching where hope has become thin. Elias set the axe down. The older woman came out of the side room before he called. She saw the riders and made a sound that did not need translation. The younger woman pushed past her, still weak, and stumbled 3 steps into the yard. One of the riders broke formation, then another. For one breath, everyone froze in the brightness. Then the yard filled with motion. The younger woman was caught in the arms of a man who slid from his horse before it stopped. The older woman held the face of another woman between her palms and spoke so quickly the words seemed to fall over each other. No one looked at Elias at first, and that was right. The living had found the living. Only after the first storm of reunion passed did the oldest rider turn toward him. He studied Elias. He studied the house, the stove smoke, the blue cloth tied to the windmill, and the rifle leaning untouched by the porch door. Then he nodded once. Not low, not dramatic. Enough. Elias nodded back. The older woman stepped to him before they left. From inside her blanket, she took a short braided cord of horsehair, wound through with the last clean thread of blue. She placed it in his palm and closed his fingers around it. She said something in her own language. Elias did not understand the words. Stood the weight. That cord was not payment. Payment would have made the thing smaller. It was witness. It said, "This happened." It said, on a night when fear could have made enemies, one door opened. The riders moved out slowly, carrying the younger woman between them at first, then letting her sit her own horse when she insisted. The older woman looked back once from the rise above the wash. Elias raised his hand. She raised hers. Then the hills took them. For years after, Elias kept the braided cord above the kitchen door. Men who visited the ranch sometimes asked where it came from. Elias never told the whole story to men who only wanted a tale that made the world simple. He would only say, "A winter gave it to me." But when the wind came hard across the north fence, and the house filled with the smell of smoke and cold wool, he would remember the blue cloth snapping in the storm. He would remember 2 footprints fading beneath new snow, and he would remember that the frontier was not only made by guns, claims, fences, and fear. Sometimes it was made by the moment a man saw a stranger freezing in the dark and decided the weather had already been cruel enough.